A man once approached Rumi and said, "Master, I am afraid of everything. I'm afraid to love because I might get hurt. I'm afraid to dream because I might fail. I'm afraid to live because I might die." Rumi smiled and said something that changed this man's life forever. He said, "Your fear is not protecting you from danger. It's protecting you from yourself." What did Rumi mean by this? And why did he believe that our deepest fears are actually gifts in disguise? To understand this, we need to go back to 13th century Konya, where Jalal ad-Din Rumi was not yet the mystical poet we know today. He was a respected scholar, a teacher of Islamic law, living a comfortable but ordinary life. And then everything changed. It began with a question. A wandering dervish named Shams asked Rumi, who was the greater, the Prophet Muhammad or the mystic Bayazid? Rumi gave the traditional answer about the Prophet's superiority. But then Shams asked another question that shattered Rumi's entire worldview. And why did the Prophet say, "We have not known you as you ought to be known," while Bayazid said, "Glory be to me. How great is my majesty?" This question terrified Rumi. It challenged everything he thought he knew about spiritual hierarchy, about certainty, about himself. For the first time in his life, the great scholar didn't have an answer. He was afraid of not knowing, afraid of appearing ignorant, afraid of having his entire worldview collapse. But instead of running from this fear, something extraordinary happened. Rumi embraced it. He recognized that his fear of not knowing was actually his soul's way of preparing him for true knowledge. His fear of appearing ignorant was protecting him from the false confidence that blocks real learning. His fear of having his worldview collapse was actually his inner wisdom, preparing him for a much larger understanding of reality. You see, Rumi discovered something that modern psychology is just beginning to understand. Our fears are not random. They're not accidents. They point directly to the areas where our soul is ready to grow. Think about it. Why are you afraid of failure? Because somewhere deep inside, you know you're capable of success, and that terrifies the part of you that's comfortable with limitation. Why are you afraid of being alone? Because your soul knows it's ready to discover its own completeness, and that threatens the part of you that's addicted to dependency. Rumi wrote, "Try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you. And do not worry that your life is turning upside down. How do you know that the side you are used to is better than the one to come?" But here's the paradox that Rumi understood. The very thing you're afraid to face is the very thing that will set you free. He tells us about this in one of his most famous stories. A man finds a snake frozen in the snow. Out of compassion, he takes it home and places it near the fire to warm it. As the snake thaws, it begins to move, and the man becomes afraid. But Rumi asks, was the man afraid of the snake, or was he afraid of his own compassion? Was he afraid of the creature, or was he afraid of the power of his own heart to bring dead things back to life? This is the secret Rumi discovered. Fear is not the opposite of love. Fear is love's way of protecting itself from being fully expressed. We're not afraid of failing. We're afraid of the magnitude of our own potential. We're not afraid of being hurt. We're afraid of the depth of our own capacity to feel. Rumi experienced this directly. When Shams disappeared from his life, some say he was murdered by Rumi's jealous students. Rumi could have been destroyed by grief. Instead, he used his fear of loss to dive deeper into love. He used his terror of separation to discover union. He used his anxiety about impermanence to touch the eternal. He wrote, "In your light, I learn how to love. In your beauty, how to make poems. You dance inside my chest where no one sees you, but sometimes I do, and that sight becomes this art, this music, this form." The fear of losing Shams didn't diminish Rumi's love. It revealed how vast his love actually was. The terror of separation didn't break him. It broke him open. And in that breaking open, he discovered that what he thought he was afraid of losing was actually what he was afraid of becoming. You see, Shams wasn't just Rumi's teacher. Shams was a mirror. And what Rumi saw in that mirror, the wild freedom, the fearless love, the complete surrender to the divine, terrified him. Not because it was foreign, but because it was so familiar. It was who he was meant to be. This is why Rumi said that fear protects us from ourselves. We're not afraid of external dangers. We're afraid of our own magnificence. We're afraid of our own power. We're afraid of our own light. But here's what Rumi discovered when you stop running from your fear and start moving toward it, it transforms. Fear becomes excitement. Anxiety becomes anticipation. Terror becomes reverence. He wrote, "Let yourself be silently drawn by the strange pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray. That strange pull you feel, that thing that both attracts and terrifies you, that's not coincidence. That's your soul calling you home." Rumi teaches us that there are 3 stages to this transformation. First, you resist the fear. You try to avoid it, control it, overcome it. But resistance only makes it stronger. Second, you accept the fear. You stop fighting it and start observing it. You begin to see that fear is not your enemy. It's information. It's your inner guidance system pointing you toward your next level of growth. But the 3rd stage is where the magic happens. You embrace the fear. You recognize it as love in disguise. You understand that what you're afraid of losing was never yours to begin with, and what you're afraid of becoming is who you've always been. Rumi lived this transformation. The respected scholar who was afraid of losing his reputation became the ecstatic poet who cared nothing for social approval. The man who was afraid of emotional intensity became the mystic who wrote, "Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment." Your biggest fear is not your obstacle. It's your invitation. It's not your limitation. It's your liberation waiting to happen. So what are you afraid of? What keeps you awake at night? What makes your heart race when you think about it? That's not your problem. That's your path. Rumi discovered that the only way out is through. The only way to overcome fear is not to overcome it at all, but to go so deeply into it that you discover what's on the other side. The very thing you've been looking for all along. As Rumi wrote in his Masnavi, when you do things from your soul, you feel a river moving in you, a joy. When actions come from another section, the feeling disappears. Your fear is pointing you toward your soul. Your terror is guiding you toward your truth. Your anxiety is escorting you toward your authentic self. The question is not whether you'll face your fear. The question is whether you'll recognize it as the gift it actually is. Because on the other side of your greatest fear is not just courage. It's not just strength. It's not just growth. On the other side of your greatest fear is the person you came here to be, and that person has been waiting for you all along.